welcome to another chapter of Read Aloud. Today we will be reading chapter 7, Stealing from an Orphanage. And as we read this chapter, this is what I want you to think about. How do you feel about Mavic, and what do you think about him when we get to the end of this chapter? Because we're going to learn some things about him. Also, just for fun, I decided to change the background so it's black, and we'll see if we like this better than the white background. All right, let's get started. Chapter 7, Stealing from an Orphanage. Mavic grinned smugly at Aurella's reaction. That annoyed her out of her shock. Suddenly, she was fuming. You lied to me! She found a pine cone on the ground and threw it at his face. Mavic ducked, suppressing a smile. I didn't lie. You did too! You said there weren't any warlocks in Dovis! I just told you that there were a few that lived here in secret. You never told me that you were one of them! She chucked another pine cone at his head. He caught it in one hand. Oh, come on. Why do you think Morella and Morton took such a special interest in me? I mean, I'm sure they would have cared anyway because they're amazing people, but they obviously couldn't leave some poor orphaned warlock to fend for himself. I can't believe you never told me. I can't believe I never knew. Well, I'm careful about it, unlike some people. Aurella threw a third pine cone at his face. As the pine cone was sailing through the air, Mavic held up his hands and it froze in place. Then he made a quick repeated circular motion with one of his fingers, and the pine cone soared off in the opposite direction. Aurella had to put her fury on hold for a moment to stare open-mouthed as the pine cone lodged itself into the trunk of a tree. Mavic cleared his throat. Hey, remember that thing I said the other day about being too masculine for mortal eyes and how guys attack me so I don't kick their butts first? Well, I wasn't exactly kidding. Aurella narrowed her eyes at him. What's that supposed to mean? Calm down. I wasn't trying to be cocky or anything. I'm just trying to explain something to you. There's a reason why we're both such troublemakers. Humans can sense magic, you know. They may not realize it or even believe in it, but they have this instinct that warns them when manipulators are near. It's like a defensive mechanism, and it makes them really tense and edgy, kind of like an angry adrenaline rush. Aurella narrowed her eyes. So you're saying that people bully me and attack you because they can sense that we're different than they are? Pretty much. I don't like how you talk about normal people like they're human and we're not. It's not that we're not human. We're just human with an extra kick. Oh, and that makes a lot of sense. It does, actually. Hidden crickets chirped in the night. An owl hooted mournfully. Time was ticking away for her, but she was too scared to leave the safety of the forest without an inkling of a plan. It's going to be okay, Mavic said, reading her mind. Come on, we'll figure something out in the morning. In the meantime, want to take out that fancy disguise Morella left you? It's okay, I think I've memorized it. Aurella closed her eyes, then chanted, Make my hair look black as a raven and my eyes turn forest green. She opened her eyes. Did it work? Yep, Mavic said. Creepy witch disguise is back on. Now let's go. Aurella looked around, wondering which direction to go. She'd never been this deep in the forest. These trees were much larger and closer than the ones she was used to. They seemed to be trying to suffocate the small rays of moonlight peeking through the branches. Her secret pond seemed a mile away. Mavic gently put his hand on her back and nudged her in the right direction. Their boots snapped twigs and pine needles as they walked. Crickets continued to chirp. Another owl hooted in the distance. Despite all the sound, Aurella couldn't help but feel that it was too quiet. Maybe it was the darkness making it feel so lonely. The shadows seemed to muffle the sounds of the forest like they were all under a giant musty blanket. As they walked through the trees, Aurella's mind continued to replay over and over what Mavic had done with the feather in the pine cone. The feather continued to tickle her nose, and the pine cone continued to lodge itself into a tree until her imagination got mixed up and she started seeing the feather tickling the pine cone. Why would a feather tickle a pine cone? She chastised herself. That doesn't make any sense. Shaking her head from her strange thoughts, she looked up at Mavic. "What?" he asked. "Can you do it again?" "Do what?" "I don't know, just do something cool. Manipulate something." Mavic made 3 quick signs with his hands, and Aurella's hair wrapped itself around her mouth. Aurella spat out bits of hair. "That was not cool, that was annoying." "Thanks, Elf." She rolled her eyes in exasperation. The first thing that Aurella thought when they reached the orphanage was that she had never seen so many children in her life. There were more kids at the orphanage than she saw at school. Without a single toy in sight, most of the kids were entertaining themselves by chasing each other and pulling each other's hair. One creative kid seemed to be trying to spell a word with different kids' bodies. "How are there so many kids here?" Aurella whispered in awe. "The orphanage covers more than just our area. We take kids from all over Dovis," Mavic whispered back. "Now go hide in the corner and hope nobody notices you. You're good at that." Aurella stuck out her tongue but obeyed. Just as she walked away, a young woman not much older than Mavic walked up to him, frowning. "You're late." "I know." "You're too old to still be doing this, Mavic. You're supposed to be setting an example." I know. I had something to take care of." "You know I have to go get Garvin." "Fine, go." Still frowning, she disappeared. Aurella snuck up behind him and whispered, "Mavic." He flinched. "Geez, don't do that." "Who's Garvin?" "Don't worry about it, Ella." "Are you going to get in trouble?" "I said don't worry about it. Now go hide in the corner. He's going to whip you too." "He's going to whip you?" A greasy-haired man came stomping through the room. He took an angry bite of jerky as he walked, flakes from some other leftover food visibly clinging to his mustache and patchy beard. He growled at the children in his path, who scurried away and hid behind each other. Mavic gave her an urgent nudge. "Go, Ella!" Aurella scurried back to the corner and stood by herself. She watched Mavic, feeling fearful and guilty that he was going to be punished again because she kept him out after dark. The nasty man sneered at Mavic. "You just never learn, do you, boy?" "Nope," Mavic muttered. He took off his tunic and stood, bracing his hands on the wall. Garvin unfurled a short whip and stood off to the side. He whipped Mavic 10 times, leaving angry pink welts on his back. Other than biting his lip, Mavic's face gave nothing away. One of the orphans across the room looked over at him with frightened eyes. Mavic put on a brave face and winked at him, like his being whipped was something funny. The rest of the orphans weren't even fazed. This must happen so often that it had become commonplace. Once he was finished, Garvin walked away whistling, seemingly happy to have inflicted pain on one of his inferiors. The nice young lady snuck past him with a wet cloth and pressed it to Mavic's back. He took the cloth from her. "I got it." She gave him a look that seemed to say, "I'm sorry," then went to help prepare the kids for bed. There were 2 large rooms in the orphanage, neither of which had a door. The boys went to the room on the right, and the girls went to the room on the left. Aurella tiptoed up to Mavic. He gave her a half-smile. "Just grab a bedroll from over there," he instructed, pointing to a mountain of raggedy blankets in the back of the room, "and take it to the room on the left. They have assigned sleeping places, but you don't actually live here, so just pick an inconspicuous spot." "How's your back?" she asked, concerned. "Oh, this is nothing, seriously. Didn't even break skin. They can't even afford a good whip." He laughed and put his shirt back on. "Now scat, or someone's going to start asking where you came from." Mavic walked away and snatched up a bedroll that was probably much too small to cover him. As he walked toward the boys' room, he playfully shoved a couple of little kids out of his way. The boys giggled and charged him. He ran away in mock terror. The little boys jumped and hung from his arms. A third little boy jumped onto his back, and they all went down laughing and giggling in a pile of kids and blankets. Aurella smiled as she watched Mavic tackle another kid. He sat on his stomach and held his arms down easily with his hands, grinning evilly. 5 more kids jumped on top of him until Mavic was completely smothered. Suddenly, Mavic burst out of the tangle of children, growling like a giant grizzly bear. "Hey!" Garvin shouted, brandishing his whip. "Settle down!" The boys immediately scattered and climbed into their bedrolls. Mavic smirked as he pushed down one last kid before setting up his bedroll near the doorway. Aurella felt a sad pang of guilt for taking Mavic away from here. These kids obviously loved him and looked up to him. He was probably the only positive influence in their lives. She couldn't imagine how she'd feel if someone tried to take Mavic away from her. Yet that's exactly what she was doing to these kids. "Come on, sweetie," the nice young lady urged. Aurella scurried to the pile of bedrolls and took one to the girls' room. The young lady frowned at her. "I don't recognize you. When did you get here?" Last week?" The young lady walked away, muttering something about too many kids. She returned with a nightgown for Aurella, who changed inside of her sleeping bag. She thought it would take forever to fall asleep. Here she was amidst all these strangers in a life or death situation. Though she knew Mavic was just in the other room, she never felt more alone in her life. But the exhaustion of the day was more powerful than her discomfort. She'd barely laid down her head before dreams of running from clankers taunted her subconscious mind. The next morning, for a moment, Aurella forgot she was a witch, and that her life was over. She rolled over in her sleeping bag, expecting more room, and flopped onto a little girl who squealed and kicked. Aurella sat up, her eyes darting around the room in confusion. Then, just as quickly, memories of yesterday came flooding back. The girl next to Aurella looked strangely up at her with sleepy eyes. "Didn't you have black hair?" Aurella looked down at her hair, which was back to its bedhead version of her golden amber waves. She squealed in panic and covered her head with her sleeping bag, then quickly whispered back into her disguise. "Can I not keep a spell going while I'm sleeping?" Aurella wondered. Soon, other little voices could be heard throughout the orphanage. Some giggled, others griped, and the rest continued to snore. The nice young lady peeked in the doorway, ringing a loud bell and calling, "Breakfast time! Wake up, get ready for the day!" Most of the little girls obeyed and began changing into raggedy old dresses. The few that ignored the wake-up call were soon awoken the hard way, by their friends jumping on top of them and laughing. Aurella swiftly changed into her dress from the day before and shoved on her shoes. She barely finished changing when the crowd of girls spilled out of the room for breakfast. Aurella sprinted after them, making sure to stay in the middle of the crowd to blend in. The clump of girls turned a corner at the back of the orphanage, which opened into a large dining hall with wooden tables and benches. On the left was a smoky kitchen with one very old woman stirring an enormous pot of some foul-smelling food. Aurella followed the example of the other girls as they grabbed a bowl from a shelf and held it out for a scoop of lumpy mush. She followed them to a bench and sat down, looking disgustedly down at her breakfast. Soon the boys ran in, led by Mavic, who carried a little boy on his shoulders. Most of the boys tried to shove their way to the front of the line, but Mavic held them back. No, Victor first. It's his birthday." The little kid on his shoulders beamed with surprise as Mavic set him down at the front of the line. "It is?" he asked. "Sure," Mavic grinned. "You haven't had one this year, right?" The little boy vigorously shook his head, and Mavic ushered him forward. He waited to get his food until every boy received their share. The cook barely had enough left to scrape half a scoop into Mavic's bowl, but he simply thanked her and walked towards the boys' table. On his way, he passed Aurella and pinched her side. She looked up at him and smiled. "You make up the kids' birthdays?" "Sure, why not?" he shrugged. "They don't know when they were born." "That's actually really sweet, Mavic." "Ugh, never use that word to describe me. Try something like burly or brawny." "I don't think so," Aurella laughed. "Look, I gotta go sit with the boys, but meet me out back after breakfast, okay? If I'm not there yet, just wait for me under the stairs. Guilt gripped Aurella once again. Before she could say anything, Garvin walked in and glared at Mavic, who quickly jogged over to the boys' table. He obnoxiously shoved his way in between two boys where there was clearly not enough room. They pushed him down, and he fell onto his back, with his feet still on the bench, chuckling loudly. Aurella smiled fondly. What a wonderful, stupid goof. Aurella's heart pounded as she waited under the stairs out back. Mavic was nowhere to be seen. She considered going to look for him, but figured doing as he asked was probably a better idea. She slid down onto the ground and picked up a stick. 10 minutes she waited, drawing pictures in the dirt, and becoming more nervous with each passing second. Finally, he appeared, carrying a large, bulging pack. Hey, how's your back? She asked. Fine, he shrugged. Totally no big deal. Where'd you get all that stuff? I stole it, he said simply. Don't you feel guilty stealing from your orphanage? Isn't it poor enough already? Well, they won't have to feed me anymore, so I figured this kind of evens things out. Aurella bit her lip and looked down. What's the matter? I just feel so guilty. This is your home, and those kids in there love you. Are you sure you want to leave them? Mavic sighed. Ella, you need me now more than they do. And besides, today's like my lucky day. It's every kid's dream to leave the orphanage. Generally with parents. Hey, your Lanetian is showing. Stop being such a pessimist. Now are you ready to go or not? Almost, but I think I should change my disguise just as a precaution. And I should probably disguise you too. Why? I'm not the one who blew my cover in front of half the village. Yeah, but it's no secret that you hang around me all the time. People know that I'm a witch, so they'll probably guess that I can disguise myself. If they see you walking around with a little girl, they'll know it's me, and then we'll both be toast. Mavic frowned. You know, you're a lot smarter than I give you credit for. Aurella gave him a bland look. Gee, thanks. All right, stand still. Don't turn me into a girl, he warned. Don't worry, she grinned. I won't turn you into a girl. Aurella closed her eyes and concentrated. Make Mavic look and sound like his 8-year-old self. Suddenly, Mavic appeared to shrink 2 feet. His muscles sunk into his arms, his chest turned flat, and his hair grew 3 inches. In a matter of moments, Mavic had turned into an adorable little boy. Hey, what'd you do to me? He demanded, his voice sounding 2 octaves higher. Aurella giggled. Hang on, I only just got started. I really hate it when you say that, he grumbled. But the grumble was less of a growl now and more of a squeak. Make Mavic appear blonde with blue eyes. Immediately his shaggy hair lightened and brightened. His dark gray eyes slowly painted themselves blue. Aurella murmured again to herself until her hair and eyes matched his. There, she said. Now we could be siblings. Oh, and now I'm the younger brother? Mavic complained. Not cool. Aurella laughed. I've always wanted a little brother. She put her arm around his neck, but it was at least twice as wide as she expected it would be. And bumpy. It was like she was clutching 2 heads. Hey! Mavic shouted, pushing an invisible something from his hips. Why are you hugging my butt? Aurella felt large invisible hands pushing her arm from what appeared to be Mavic's neck. She stepped back and turned red. That is the freakiest thing I've ever experienced. Welcome to my world, Mavic said under his breath. I forgot you're still your normal size. You just look that small. Can we just get this over with? I hate feeling tiny. Yeah, lead the way, short one. He glared at her, then took a deep breath. All right, let's do this. All right, that's the end of this chapter. The next chapter is chapter 8, and that one's called And Now It's Mavic's Turn. His turn for what? Wonder what's going to happen there. Thanks for joining in on this chapter of Aurella the Witch. Remember, your thinking question was, What are your thoughts and feelings about Mavic at the end of this chapter, after everything we've learned about him and seen from how he interacts with all the kids at the orphanage and the things he's giving up? Just what do you think about him at the end of this chapter? And we will pick up next time with chapter 8. Bye, guys!